I didn't want to leave. It's a real heavy heart to be leaving. My heart said carry on, but these things and the seriousness of my sepsis that's taken all my limbs, my hands and feet, and still a long road of rehabilitation ahead. I'm just really not ready for it at this time. So the snap election, I might have been kidding myself that I'd have been ready if the election had been October, November, but the ball would have been in my court to give it a bit more time. But it's not to be. Too much of a snap election. I'm not ready for it. But yeah, I'm hoping we still win it.
This is the exit interview of Craig Mackinlay, one of more than 100 MPs standing down at the election. He's been the Conservative MP for South Thanet since 2015. And Craig, really appreciate you joining us today. With all these interviews, I've been starting with the same question, and your answer is very, very different to everyone else's. But I'll start with the same question. Why are you leaving?
I didn't want to leave. It's a real heavy heart to be leaving. My heart said carry on, but these things and the seriousness of my sepsis that's taken all my limbs, my hands and feet, and still a long road of rehabilitation ahead. I'm just really not ready for it at this time. So the snap election, I might have been kidding myself that I'd have been ready if the election had been October, November, but the ball would have been in my court to give it a bit more time. But it's not to be. Too much of a snap election. I'm not ready for it. But yeah, I'm hoping we still win it. But perhaps that is being more optimistic than many.
Well, let's be more optimistic about your path of recovery, rather than the recovery of the Conservative Party. Just go back, because it has happened all so quickly, and to be where you are is extraordinary, really, when it was only, the tail end of last year that you just started off feeling a bit under the weather.
Yeah, it was the 27th of September. It was the recess period, the conference recess, and we were going to go on holiday, actually, the next morning. And I was at work on the 27th, feeling just a little bit under the weather, but you just thought, oh, a bit of a cold, bit of, whatever, really. Did a COVID test, found the COVID test at the back of the drawer where they're accumulating dust, like most people's are now. And because there was a bit of COVID around those days, it was negative, and didn't think anything of it. Went to bed early, felt increasingly unwell during the night, was sick. And by the morning, white as a sheet. Wife couldn't feel any sort of pulse in my hands. And she called the ambulance, and that was the start of the very serious septic shock, which came on within an hour of going to the hospital. And there I was, put in a coma for the next 16 days with everything shutting down. So yeah, lucky to be alive, actually. My wife was told only a 5% chance of survival. So yeah, I'm the 95% survival man. So yeah, rather pleased about that. The alternative was far worse, but yes, left with some pretty life-changing changes to me, really. But we'll get over it, and I'm happy and more able every single day.
Well, we're so pleased about that, Craig, because I think our paths have crossed a few times over the years, and you've always been someone who's been amazingly upbeat and positive about, getting stuff done and, serving your constituents and all of that. To find yourself in that situation, a genuine life or death situation, and then a life-changing situation with losing your hands and your feet, how far back in your mind does politics end up being in that situation, where, having lived and breathed, being such a political creature?
I'm not sure it ever went, really. I mean, obviously, I didn't think about it too much for those 16 days that I was in a coma. Had some very weird dreams, that included some of my MP colleagues, most weird dreams you'll ever have, including being the King of Gibraltar. I enjoyed that one. But no, once I sort of came to and was getting ready for the amputations on the 1st December, I had a staff member coming into St Thomas's Hospital, literally just over the bridge from Parliament. I was getting a stream of MP visitors on a daily basis. So politics was there every single day, and I was still doing casework and all of those type of things. So I just wasn't physically in Parliament, but my soul was still, because I was getting updated with all of my colleagues with what's going on. And it was pretty much running the operations, but from my hospital bed. So yeah, I don't think politics ever went away during those 7 months that I was actually in hospital at all. So yeah, it was business as usual, except I wasn't there, and that was about the only difference.
Do you think it helped? I don't mean that in a sort of facetious way, but that sense of routine, the sense of your mind having something to think about, doing what you could, because it was a sense of normality in a really, really abnormal situation.
I suppose it was good to have your mind on something else. Yes, and I even did manage to organise one of the biggest backbench rebellions, actually, from my hospital bed. That was on this the statutory instrument that was going to, or it did get through, obviously, but bringing in a phased increase in electric vehicles. So I organised a rebellion of 31 against that from my phone in bed in St Thomas's. So that was quite fun. So yes, I was very much thinking about politics on a daily basis, and particularly my concerns about net zero, which will remain to this day. And hopefully we might cover that. But I will foresee that if the last 10 years was the battle over Brexit, I think the next 10 years will be the battle over net zero and energy security. And I think that is going to be a big battle. And that will be a philosophical battle between the more sensible path, and certainly don't think we're on the right path as a Conservative government, but it was a slightly more sensible path. We will perhaps see the full horrors of what Labour have got in store in terms of energy security. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be a completely life-changing for the way we do things. It will probably mean the closure of every single high-energy business in the UK. It's going to make the UK a very different place if we don't get this right. And I can be absolutely sure Labour will get this wholly and absolutely wrong.
But let's you touched on Brexit there. We should probably talk about that a bit. You came in 2015 as the Conservative MP for South Thanet, but you were, in fact, a founding member of UKIP. Your political life has been sort of caught up in that. When you look back over your almost a decade in Parliament, but quarter of a century really of campaigning on this. Lots of people, we get whenever we talk about Brexit on the show, we get messages coming in saying it's been a disaster. Why is no one talking about it? Are you someone who thinks actually it has turned out as you hoped, or someone who thinks it's not the Brexit that you hoped for, it hasn't been done properly?
Yeah, we got it over the line. That was the main thing. And you're quite right. If it hadn't been for about the issue of Britain's membership of the then EEC, then EU, I would have carried on as a chartered accountant and probably be retired sitting on a beach somewhere by now. But no, it absolutely drove me. It was my absolute principle was to get Britain out of the EU. So yes, you could say that job was done. Has it been done completely and absolutely the way I wanted it? No. But then I suppose everybody's got their idea of what Brexit should have mean. I'd have been happy with a hard Brexit, but I don't think we're making the most of those opportunities. We've signed a lot of trade deals. The CPTPP Pacific Partnership deal could never happen while you're an EU member. That will bear a lot of fruit over time. I have no doubt about that. Have we cut the bureaucracy that we could do outside the EU? No, we haven't done that, but we've got the ability to do so. So we've given the framework to do the job very properly. It's just whether governments are going to be strong enough or just get gripped by timidity and what the civil servants tell them to actually do the job entirely, absolutely and properly and get ourselves back to being a more of a common law-based country rather than the Napoleonic rules-based one that the EU was all about, that we frankly haven't quite left properly. And I've got my huge concerns about Northern Ireland. I mean, it was quite strange. My seat being South Thanet, it's now boundary change is now East Thanet. It couldn't be further away than from Northern Ireland than any seat in the country. And yet I was very, very concerned and exercised about the issue of Northern Ireland being treated differently from the rest of the UK. There could have been, I think we just needed to play hardball with the EU on that, and we would have got our way because we were never going to put a border up. If they'd wanted to and force the Republic to put a border up against Northern Ireland, well, so be it, let them do it. I don't think they'd have done that either. So I think it needed a decent game of poker, and we didn't play the hand as well as I'd have liked us to do. But, again, we are where we are, that great heal all, and it could be better. But I'm generally pretty satisfied that is a job done. And that's, I mentioned net zero. I will mention it probably for the rest of my life because it's going to be infinitely more expensive and intrusive than EU membership ever was. The estimates of the cost of decarbonising the UK economy is something like £3 trillion, more than the entirety of our annual GDP. If you think we can just pluck that out of thin air, I think you're talking to the birds, frankly.
Why did you go from UKIP, was the sort of the initial vehicle of leaving the EU, to essentially defect to the Conservatives? Was it because actually, sometimes you have to compromise a bit, and that was the vehicle you thought where you could have the most influence? Was there something about UKIP and Nigel Farage and all of that you thought was a bit much? I mean, clearly he's right back in the thick of it now with the election campaign.
Well, it was always quite perverse why he chose to stand against me in South Thanet in 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, why would you fight against a Conservative that is as Brexity as him? So, if you're a Conservative voter, you weren't going to leave. You're going to stay with the Conservative because you've got everything you want in one package. But why did I leave? I suppose there were the roots of just perpetual arguments in UKIP. Sadly, it had at times attracted some oddball characters that just thought, I just don't really want to be around them. And there was a couple of frauds, so MEP frauds, which led to a couple of UKIP MEPs going to prison. I'm a chartered accountant, chartered tax advisor. That didn't sit very comfortably with me. And also, it was becoming a little bit more polite society to be able to talk about EU membership within the Conservative Party. And what did I want out of UKIP when I helped found it? Did I ever think we were going to sweep to victory in the House of Commons? No, I think it was almost a little bit like what the Brexit Party achieved later. It was a serious nudge to a main political party, the Conservative Party in this case, to actually do something about it out of a bit of fear of where the ballot box might be going for them. And if you say that's what I wanted out of UKIP and potentially what the Brexit Party achieved, subsequently, yes, that was sort of job done. It was a vehicle to nudge. And is that what it's sort of doing today? Does it think it's going to sweep into Westminster? No, of course not. But I suppose it is trying to punish the Conservative Party quite perversely, where I think the enemy, is on the other side. I don't think ideologically many of us in the Conservative Party and Reform are massively different from each other. I'm sure we're not, but we are both massively different from the Labour Party. But the Labour Party will be the only beneficiaries of this latest action. But will it nudge potentially the Conservative Party into in a more forthright approach on the ECHR and immigration? Well, possibly so, but that won't do us much good if we're on the opposition benches. So I can't see what it's doing at the moment is doing anybody any good for the sake of the country. But that's my view. And I know that's been aired in many of the media, and I know it's a line that the Conservative Party is actually pushing, and I think rightly so.
Where do you stand on the question of if Nigel Farage does get into the House of Commons? It's suggestions that he might do. What should the Conservative Party do if the polls are right and they are on the opposition benches? Should they turn their back on him or bring him into the fold? Would they be better off if Nigel Farage was just the leader of the Conservative Party?
Well, I don't think that is ever going to happen, but the Conservative Party is quite a strange beast. It is a very, very broad church. It has people very different from me that are more on the centre, even sort of leaning left, if you like. And then you've got people like myself and the ERG, which see the world through a different prism. But we all manage to get together because we know that being in government is infinitely better than being on the opposition benches. Now, I'm a little sad that we didn't manage to keep everyone in the fold, including Nigel and others, back in 2019 when we had that historic victory, because that was the time to make that broad church that little bit broader again and to accommodate Nigel and others. So that we could all be right of centre in the same tent, having a bit of a row from time to time. Of course, that's what we do already in the Conservative Party. But it is based on ideology. But we can accommodate all wings, and we proved that in 19 because we got a lot of new voters that we hadn't seen for years, if ever before. And that's where we should have kept it. It's a sad fact that it didn't happen. I don't know who to blame for that. Was it in Boris's ambit to do that? Possibly it was, but it wasn't done for whatever reason. And we are where we are and not in a very good place, unfortunately.
Craig, we'll come to some classic exit interview questions in a moment. You talking about the extraordinary thing you've been through in the last 6-9 months, the sepsis, losing your hands and your feet. I just wondered whether, because you're still very strident, you still stick to lots of things you talked about before. Has your experience changed you or your politics in any way?
No, I've got some new things to campaign for, and I was hoping to be in Parliament another few months to actually campaign for them. And that is to make sure that recognition of sepsis is really a little bit more embedded within the population. The NHS understands it. Obviously, they know what they're looking for. It's very much embedded in the NHS. There are posters up everywhere, and I think the staff get a lot of training. But do you understand sepsis? Like you, Matt, if you were to see a friend or a family member very unwell for a few days, would you recognise that and think, this might be sepsis, this might be very, very serious, if not, potentially leading to death? And that's what I wanted to encourage, that we're all thinking about sepsis. Wouldn't have done me any good because mine was too rapid. But usually you get a few days, you get 2, 3, 4, 5 days of getting increasingly feeling unwell. And if that can be recognised in day 1 or 2, you've got a pretty good chance of coming out the other side, maybe not even losing anything. You might lose a little finger if you're really unlucky, but you won't be losing the lot or dying. So that was one thing I wanted to do. The other thing is to make sure that people like me get the right prosthetics at the right time. I've seen more of the NHS than I ever really wanted to see. That would be a story and a discussion for another day. But it can't be right. I mean, I've got the 2 on now. The NHS give these out. Now, I think William the Conqueror would say, yeah, I understand that. We can probably make one of those. But that's what they're giving out in 2024. This is what the private sector gives out. You've got to pay for them.
So to explain it, so one of them is it's a very rudimentary sort of, not quite a hook, but like a blunt rubbery hook, and the other one is a full prosthetic metal hand which can pick up and grip and.
Exactly. I mean, it's not as good as your hand, obviously, but it's pretty good. And the NHS will give you these, but you have to wait about 3 years for them. So I don't know what people who've got 2 limbs gone are meant to do for those 3 years, because you can't really do very much for that. I've been saying laughingly in the media the last few weeks, all I can see they're good for is breaking windows or pub fights. I can't really see they're much good for anything else. But these are very good. So I think I've actually have sown the seeds of getting improvements on this, particularly for bilateral amputees. If you've only got one arm missing, yeah, you might get on with an arm and one of those because you'll have a proper arm still. But if you've got neither of them, you've frankly got to have these. You've got to. Otherwise, well, there's basic functions, dare I say, you can't even do for yourself without them.
So you mentioned these are things that you were hoping to campaign on because you came back into the Commons in May when everyone thought the election was going to be in the autumn. As it turned out, you were there in the House of Commons. A really lovely moment, quite emotional moment. There was a round of applause, a standing ovation from right across the House. And then a few hours later, in the pouring rain, Rishi Sunak called the election. Did you know he was going to do that?
No, not at all. I mean, it was meant to be my sort of start on the roadway back into Parliament. I know there wouldn't have been many weeks left until the summer recess, and then we'd have, in a few weeks after summer before the conference recess, and then we'd probably, everyone anticipated we'd then be going into a general election. But yeah, it was meant to be my first day back, and I'd be going in when I could, part-time, as I'm feeling better and all the rest of it. But no, it ended up being my last hurrah. And it was, as you say, it was a very, very nice last hurrah. And, in some ways, to leave on such a high is quite rare in politics. So I sort of take that, I'll bank that and say, yes, I've left at the top of my game rather than getting, as many do, they sort of perhaps stay too long. But yeah, so I'm pleased about that. But it was a shock. It was a shock.
Yeah.
And not least because dare I say, being a bit of a media hungry sort of guy, I think I might have dominated the evening news. But no, the election did that instead.
Well, I'm glad you didn't know about it because I don't need to ask you if you put a bet on when the election was going to be. So let's rewind then. Let's go back to the question that I've been asking everyone in these exit interviews is about your various bosses, your party leaders, and how you got on with them. So you came in 2015. David Cameron. Sum up David Cameron in a word.
David Cameron was quite aloof, actually. He very rarely spoke to his backbenchers, if I'm honest. I mean, he was a great performer. I think he was a good good PM all round. Good-looking guy, nice-looking family. He was a good advert for Britain. And yeah, I was sort of sorry that he left, but he should never have nailed his colours to the mast on Brexit. He should have done a Harold Wilson and said, "Well, I've delivered it. You make your mind up." And I'll vote like everybody else with what I think I'll do. But he threw himself into it, left himself nowhere to go afterwards, and left. And strangely enough, I mean, I will tell you this: after he'd left as PM, he became very chatty and friendly. And I thought, well, why the hell weren't you like this a bit more when you were PM? But there we are.
He probably had a bit more time on his hands. Probably
the
difference. Theresa May in a word, then.
Theresa May. I don't know. I suppose you could say, being one of the Spartans, I was one of those semi-responsible for her downfall through rejecting meaningful vote 1, 2, and 3. Again, I liked her very much. Actually, she was a very personable woman. Actually, rather warmer than she came across, perhaps as PM. But yes, she was wrong on Brexit. When you think that's the reason I came into politics was to deliver a proper Brexit, and I'm afraid her Chequers deal and whatever. I mean, it's almost in the midst of time what we were doing at the time. We have multiple choice.
It all meant so much at the time, and now it's sort of disappeared. Yeah.
No, I have nothing bad to say about Theresa May. I just think, on Brexit, she had it so wholly wrong. And it could have been, again, for her, so much different if she'd played hardball and played the Texas Hold'em poker with the EU a little bit stronger.
Then, obviously, she then came and went, replaced by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, sum up him in a word.
I mean, just a winner. I mean, he is a winner. I always have my doubts whether, well, he's certainly not sort of the same brand of conservatism as I've got. He was always a metropolitan conservative. He famously won 2 terms in London. I mean, in London as a conservative as mayor, there's not many people who could deliver that. And so as a winner, he was unrivaled. I mean, he has that star quality. And he came to see me actually while I was in a rehabilitation clinic in Kennington. And the people there, they didn't know he was coming, but they were absolutely mesmerized when they saw him. It's Boris. I didn't expect to see that today. There is just that aura of something just interesting, fun, and a winner. So I'd call him that, frankly. And I was very, very sorry that certain parts of the Conservative Party effectively threw him out. And the rest is history, shall we say? Again, so where we are.
We are where we are. So he goes out. In comes Liz Truss, albeit not for very long. Sum up Liz Truss in a word.
I think she had some bold ideas. Didn't take advice from those who would have given her some help, I think, along the way to say, yeah, your tax ideas were great ideas, perhaps at the wrong time. Or why didn't you just do it this way for the first year and see where we get on? I think she just ran it a little bit too fast. I'm one for bold action. I agree with that. But she was almost Liz Trussy unready, I would say. She hadn't quite got all her ducks in a row to deliver what I think could have been a very, very exciting premiership. And she needn't. I mean, immediately she got rid of Kwasi. You could see that was it. That was the end of her. Mm-hmm. But you could say that the OBR took her out. The Bank of England took her out. Even the IMF even had something to say about her, quite minimal tax cuts. We were talking about 5 billion or so out of a government expenditure of $1 trillion. I mean, it was a drop in the ocean, literally a drop in the ocean, what she was proposing. But all these, so-called international independent bodies all came out against her and effectively took her down. It could have been so much better. But there we are. Again, a woman I like her very much. And again, she came to see me while I was in recuperation as well. So I was pleased to see her.
And then so out she goes. In comes Rishi Sunak. Sum up Rishi Sunak in a word.
I think he's very competent Prime Minister. I mean, it's very difficult to follow, I suppose, that sort of panache of Boris. And I think the world has come somehow to expect PMs to have a dash of something about them. Well, Rishi isn't that, but he's a very decent man, and I like him very much. Again, I think some of his advice in number 10, I expect he should come and speak to us a bit and say, come on, we're part of the same team here. Happy to be your Praetorian Guard and do things for you. But again, I'm afraid many PMs, they go into number 10 and they don't really listen to what's happening out there. But no, I like Rishi very much. I think he's a good managerial PM. Just sorry for him that it's sort of turning out the way it is at the moment, because he means very, very well and people do like him when they meet him.
So whatever happens in the election, there are going to be a lot more new MPs in the Commons. You were there for a long time in different times under different leaders and all that. If somebody's of any party, if somebody's coming in as a new MP, what advice would you give them? Whether it's how to get on, how to not get on, how to organise a rebellion from your bed, or where the best cup of tea is. What's your advice to a new MP?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, even now, after all these years, you sometimes walk over to a boat with another colleague, you're having a chat, and they'll go a different way that you didn't even know existed. And that's me after 9 years. There's still ways through that maze of the palace that I'm still yet to find. Familiarize yourself with the place. Be very nice to the staff, because they're there to help you. They are there to help you. Be friends with everyone. That's what I've always tried to be. And please, I hope one of the new MPs takes the snuff at the door, because I'm the only one who left who did. And if someone doesn't continue that, then it'll be gone for good, be gone forever.
So just Craig, just explain for people who don't know, what do you mean by taking the snuff at the door?
Right. Well, there's one of the doormen, the senior doorman, holds a box of snuff. It's been there, well, forever, I suppose, since snuff was invented, I'd imagine. And it is still available for members. I think it was introduced when smoking was banned in the chamber in Victorian times. So you can take snuff from the doorman before you go in, just to get your nicotine levels up a little bit. I was a smoker. I'm not anymore after this, so I suppose perversely this might have saved my life. But yes, I was the only one left who took the snuff. I'm certainly hoping that somebody will. Otherwise, it'll find itself in a drawer, never to be seen again. And I rather like tradition. But no, how can you describe it to new MPs? It is the most amazing place you'll ever work in the whole of your life. It's got a very special place in the history of this country, and every day it was a real privilege to be able to enter there as a member. So enjoy it, and don't waste a minute of it. It's there to help you, and you're there to serve it and your constituents. It's the most fascinating job, and it's a privilege to have done it for 9 years, 9 and a bit years. It's not as long as many parliamentary careers, but I certainly, I will look back very fondly on my period there and serving my constituents. It's a great job.
I've been ending each of these exit interviews by asking what you'll do next. You've given me a bit of a sense of what you want to do. I'm intrigued as to whether you'd ever go back. You obviously wanted to be there a bit longer. You talked about being the first bionic MP at one point. Could you see yourself ever re-entering the Commons?
I very rarely go back, actually. No, I don't think so. I think that's probably unlikely. I'm 57 now, so another, say this runs 5 years, 62. I think it's quite rare. It does happen. People do go into Commons for the first time in their 60s. But would I go back? Probably not. No, I think that's done. I'm always one for opening a new chapter of a book. I've done that chapter. Time to do something different. I've always, throughout, been a chartered accountant. I'm still a partner in a practice. They'll be rather pleased to see a bit more of me, I'm sure. I think I'll probably have a bit of a portfolio career. It'd be nice to do a bit of media. So yeah, if you'd like to vacate that seat, Matt, I'll be very happy to take it from you. No, I'd like to do a little media slot. That would suit me very well, and just do a few bits and pieces, maybe a bit of consulting in bits that I'm interested in. But yeah, because I've got to earn a crust. I've got a young family, and all that's got to continue, of course.
Well, Craig, it's been lovely to speak to you. It's a great one. It's the last of these exit interviews we're doing before the election. So I'm really pleased that we could do it with you. And actually, a reminder, which is what this whole series has been about, reminding our listeners that whatever party, whatever politics, politicians are human beings, and they go through sometimes small things, and in your case, absolutely enormous, extraordinary things. So we wish you all the best in whatever happens in the future. Craig Mackinlay, thanks so much for joining us for your exit interview.
Cheers, Matt. That was lovely.